Hi, Pam here. I am going to show you how to make my famous sourdough today. A lot of you have had it and a lot of you have asked for the recipe. I always kind of hedge and say, well, you should buy this book or that book. But honestly, I've combined sort of recipes and methods from a couple of different books to make it sort of streamlined and quickly and something that can easily fit into your daily life. I wake up sourdough starter in the morning to make the leaven. Around 5 in the afternoon, it's ready, and I make the dough. And by bedtime, it's ready to be formed into boule, put in the banneton, which are baskets, and then put in the fridge for the final rise overnight. We bake it in the morning in these cast iron pots. Now, before you get all panicky and say, oh, I don't have a cast iron pot, what can I do? You can actually, in a pinch, until you know you want to keep doing it, just use your basic Dutch oven from your cookery set. It can discolor it a bit, and you do have to make sure that it's oven safe to 475, but you can use it in a pinch. I also used to use an old baking bowl, a stoneware baking bowl. Basically anything you have that has a top and a bottom and can be like a bowl or something that has a lid. You could probably even use your roasting pan if it's a lidded one. The main thing is you need something to go in the oven at a high temperature that has a lid. So that's number one. Number two, you need a scale of some kind. It doesn't have to be brand new or anything. It has to be relatively accurate. Number three, you need a large bowl. I have doubled the recipe today for you, but you will normally be making a half amount from what I've made. I've gotten into the habit of making 4 loaves because I like giving them away. So that's the main thing. I also throw them in the freezer. I do have a large freezer in my home for storage, and so it's really helpful if for some reason I'm away. My household basically only eats this bread. Okay, so those are kind of the preliminaries. There are probably a few things I forgot in the method, which has all been pre-recorded for you, and I do have a recipe for you on paper. If any of you are interested in using the source materials that I used the book Tartine, and I used the book Flour, Salt, Water, Yeast, even though the recipe I used was the sourdough from that, and therefore it did not contain any yeast. The recipe contains flour, water, salt. That's it. It's about as pure as it can get. Now, the results of the recipe. This is the bread that was made this morning. If you look at the loaf, you can see how it's a bit shiny. It's quite, can you hear that? Crispy. In fact, while it's cooling, you'll hear it kind of going pop, pop, pop. And if you look even closer, you can see the bubbles on the surface and these bubbles where it's broken inside. So let's have a look at it when we slice it, and you'll see what it looks like inside. Now you do need a pretty good bread knife. This can be a bit of a challenge with a less sharp knife. This one wasn't hugely expensive. It's a Henkel kind of commercial quality, which means it's not the best Henkel at all, but it's only about $30. Got it in Chinatown. Here we go. Look at the texture of the loaf. It's very nice. This one has quite even bubbles. Sometimes you'll find a great big air hole, which is actually kind of indicates how good the bread is. We kind of want slightly random holes in there. You can't really see the texture as much as I can, but it's slightly sticky, and it should be. When it's fresh like this bread is still barely warm. The texture should feel sticky. It kind of feels sticky for the first day. It is absolutely delicious with butter on it. After the first day, you're a little bit better off toasting it, but meh, what the heck. Either way, it's still good. It can be toasted now as well. Also, look at the texture, the sort of bounciness of that bread. You can see that it's elastic and springy. So that is the bread you are trying to achieve. The crust is formed because we're baking it covered for the first half hour. All of the method is detailed in the recipe, but the recipe is also somewhat detailed in the video. I guess you could make it just watching the video. Anyway, that's the bread. So enjoy the method and have fun. I hope it works out for you. If you live in North Van, I can always get some starter to your doorstep, or you can pick it up from mine. You may know a friend who has starter, or you can make your own. I will include those notes in the recipe as well. It does take a few days to make a reliable starter. Okay, so once the ingredients are mixed, you want to have basically a very thick batter. It's almost a dough. And that, I find, is the right consistency for the starter. Okay, so I just leave my starter on the counter like this. This is about 2 hours in. I do leave it tightly covered. You can see I have to pry the bowl lid off. Now, if you look inside, you can see that we're starting to have some bubbles on top. It is not ready yet, but that shows that it's active. When it's ready, it's going to be a lot kind of puffy, and yeah, you'll see. And we'll do the float test. Okay, we can see how puffy and spongy it's looking now, with lots more holes in the top. Just about ready. I mean, it's usable now. The test you need to do is the float test, and I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is put the measuring bowl on the scale and hit the 0 to zero it out. We are making a double recipe of this bread, so I am doubling the amount of flour. Normally it is 804 grams of white because I'm making the blonde. I've already measured 804 grams and put it in the bowl. I'm doing another 804, so I don't have to like pay attention to how much I'm taking, except sort of towards the end. Otherwise I can just scoop, scoop, scoop. A little bit more. Ooh, a little bit too much. There we go, 804 exactly. Putting that in the bowl. Now we're going to measure the whole wheat. Same again, only in this case it is 76 grams. So I will do 152 grams. I actually don't have that much left, so I'm going to pour it in. 152 grams of this flour. 167, a little bit of overkill, a little bit of that out. This is very hands-on. 152, there we go. So we have the two flours together in the bowl. There isn't much whole wheat. We just mix this together with our hands. The next thing is to measure the salt. The salt is 22 grams per recipe. And of course, actually, you know what? I'm just going to use the lid for this. It'll be easier and we'll zero that out. I'm just going to pour this in. Bear with me. It may not go that easily. We've got 28, quite a bit of salt. 61, a bit too much. 51, close enough. Again, I don't find the salt being exact to matter that much. So these are our dry ingredients. I'm using kosher salt, by the way. I've ground it more. I got the coarse stuff by mistake. So there we go. That's all mixed. Just kind of going to make a little bit of a well in the middle to take our wet ingredients. Put our measuring bowl back on there. Zero it out again. And we're going to measure in the leaven, which I will do with a big wooden spoon here. 216 grams at a time, and I have space to do the whole 432. So I'm just going to scoop that out. I know more or less what I'm looking for here. So 450, overshot the mark a teeny weeny bit. Again, I could have left that, but it's better to get it right if you can. Yeah, come on. There we go. I think that's going to be about right. 437, close enough. Now, I'm going to put that into the bowl. With me. Put that into the bowl. I'm going to scrape it out into the middle. And now I am going to measure the water. I'm leaving a little leaven in the bowl, so I'm going to zero it out again. Move this out of the way. Now, water is 684 grams per recipe, so about 1,400 altogether here. I am pouring that water in from another jug. It's almost the whole jug. 12, 13, 58, 14, 42. That's a little bit too much. 13, oh goodness, measuring is such a pain. Good enough. I usually need to act more anyway. So I poured that in here. Now, I don't need the scale anymore. You can see the leaven floating around there in the water, which is great. Shows you how lively and awake it is. I'm just mixing these together like this. Scooping the rest of this out of here. And I'm actually putting the rest of that water in there. You'll see why in a minute. Because this stuff gets really sticky. So I'm mixing the leaven and the water together first, and then gradually incorporating bit by bit the flour in there just with my hands. I know some people get grossed out by touching dough like this. It is a bit disgusting sometimes, but this is really the only way to do it well. I mean, in my opinion, anyway. Now, I've got a lot of it mixed in and incorporated there. It's not fully incorporated. I'm going to start squishing it like this. It's a scissor cut motion. It's actually a really good way to get everything properly incorporated. I'm kind of pulling it over. This is mimicking the pull and fold method that we will be using ongoing to mix this dough. We need that clanging there. So we're squishing, pulling all this off my hands, which are coronavirus clean, everyone. Meaning I've scrubbed the heck out of them, as I always do, and I'm going to mix things for cooking. Now, we can do that a bit, just to get things a little more slippery. Now, I'm going to do about 40 or 50 turns like this. I won't make you watch me do that. We'll come back in at the end. Okay, so I'm still mixing the dough. I'm at 33, 34, 35, 36. You can see the difference in it. It's quite well incorporated. 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. It's a shaggy, big, wet mass of dough here. Okay, so that's about 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. I normally do it quite slowly and methodically, but you don't need to. Now, I'm just leaving that like that. I'm enveloping the whole bowl in a plastic bag, And I actually use the same one all the time. It's my bread bag. Plastic works best. You can saran wrap the top, you can use a lid if you happen to have a container with a lid, but it really does need to be covered, and it works much better if it is, look at those hands, baby, if it is covered with something non-permeable, shall we say. Okay, we're leaving that for half an hour wrapped in a plastic bag. See you in half an hour. Okay, so now I'm uncovering my bowl, taking the plastic off it, and you can see that the dough has changed a little bit. It's still a bit battery and quite wet, but it's got a little bit more volume and robustness to it. Now I'm going to do the first of several churn folds. So I pull it up and over. It's quite wet and sticky still. Up and over, up, over, up, over. I'm going to do this 7, 8, 9 times, kind of until I get a bit of a ball that looks like it's holding together. You'll see when that happens. You can see that it's looking more like dough at this point, just from doing this a few times. Okay, I would say that's enough. I'm covering it up again. I'm just going to leave it for another half hour. Honestly, half hour, hour, it's kind of forgiving, this process. I like to do it over a period of about 2 hours every half hour. So I'll see you at the end. I'm not going to film it again until the very end with the last folds. Okay, so I have done 4 or 5 turns now. I think this is the 6th. You can see the difference in the dough. It's very springy, still very wet. It's a wet dough, but very like springy and bubbly now. So we are going to do the pull, flop over, pull up, pull over. This is in lieu of kneading. This is, it makes differently textured bread from kneading. Kneading is a bit too rough for sourdough. You lose a lot of the gas bubbles. Okay, I think I'm going to do one more pull. And now I am just going to leave that for another 2 or 3 hours. Now, just to get the timing on this, I made the dough at around 4:30. I usually do it around 4:30 or 5. It is now 7:30, 7:45. It's 7:45. So I'm going to leave this basically until bedtime. And then we will form the loaves and put them in the banneton baskets and put them in the refrigerator overnight. Okay, so if you look in there, you can see how much the dough has grown. It could probably grow a little bit more, but I want to go to bed, so I'm doing it now. It's good enough. Now, I'm going in with a flexible scraper. This is really helpful. You don't absolutely have to have one, but it's nice if you do. I'm pulling the dough out of the bowl, spilling it out onto the counter like this, getting it as clean as I can. Now, next I'm going to sprinkle, the top of the dough as it rests with some flour. This is just to facilitate cutting the dough. I'm going to cut this into 4. Normally it would be 2, but as mentioned earlier, I doubled the recipe. Now, as you can see, these are not equally sized. Don't worry about that too much. I find that generally speaking, within certain parameters, it doesn't matter if they're identical. I normally end up with one really big one and others that are less big. Now I'm just going to show you how I work one ball of dough and put it in the banneton, and then I will leave the others and show you what we do in the morning. So pull, fold, same as you did in the bowl. Flip it over, making sure you've got some flour on your hands. Look at that beautiful big bubble right there. I just pull in, pull in, pull in, pull in. Don't have to overdo this. I'm just forming the loaf. Take one of the bannetons. The bannetons are, generally speaking, prepared with rice flour and wheat flour, a 50-50 mix. I'm just adding a little extra wheat flour because I haven't re-prepped them in a while. That's it. Those are going to go in plastic bags in the fridge. Look, I don't know if you can see, but there are tiny bubbles all over the surface of the loaf. Beautiful. 3 more to go, and then we are going to put them in plastic bags in the fridge. Follow me over this way. In the morning, I'm going to put these 2 Lodge pots, cast iron pots, into the oven. In fact, I'm going to do it now. And in the morning, I will turn the oven on to 475. See you then. All right, I have preheated the oven to 475 degrees. I'm using convection bake. I don't think it matters either way, it's just a habit. You can see inside the oven here, I have the 2 cast iron pots up here. I'll explain more about cookware later, or at the beginning of the video, I probably did. Taking these guys out and closing the oven again, we want to preserve that heat. It's important to preheat the oven with the pots in the oven so that they can be at the correct temperature. Removing both lids here, you can see how hot the pans are. Now, I'm going to release the dough gently from the banneton. You can see how springy and elastic it is. Flipping it in to the pans. I like a natural crack. I have a friend who is adamant that you need to score it. So what I'm going to do is, oops, I'm losing my lem. I am going to score one of them, even though I'm wasting tons of time doing this. Let's just do one little, see, I hate the way this bread cuts. Part of the reason I don't do this. I find it too sticky to cut well. Okay, we're putting the lids back on. Do not forget to put your oven mitts on or you're going to be really sorry and have no fingers. Okay, back in the oven. I find pushing into the back of the oven gets the best result. Close it up and timer for 30 minutes. This is the first part of the bake covered. Okay, see you in 30 minutes. Oh, there goes the timer. Okay, so we're turning that off. And I am going to show you what to do next. Now, a little bit. And I'm uncovering these. Now, if you can see, the bread has risen and split. Oh, there's the one I cut, not very effectively. And we are going to now bake this uncovered for 15 to 20 minutes in my oven. 15 is more than ample. Now, I'm leaving the lids in because I want to do a second batch. And if you are baking and perhaps only have one pot to use, you are going to want to split your baking as well. So it's really important to keep everything as hot as possible. Otherwise, you have to reheat it, which is annoying and just wastes time. Okay, we'll see you in 15 minutes. Okay. The bread should be baked. Let's have a quick look in the oven and make sure. Beautiful. Look at that. Dark and toasty. I don't see a big difference in the scored one versus the other one, but that is largely because I didn't score it properly. Okay. we're going to grab a tool because sometimes the bread just sticks a little bit. There we go. And this helps getting it out. Up we go over to our cooling rack. And loaf number 2. Now, let's get a close-up on these loaves. Look at the shiny surface and the marks of the Benetton. And you can see just little bubbles on the surface there, if you look closely. If the room were quieter, you'd be able to hear the bread crackling a little bit. Anyway, that's generally what it looks like. I'm now going to put the other 2 right into these pans and back in the oven, covered for 30 minutes. See you at the end. Okay, here we go. All the loaves are out of the oven, looking very pretty. Now, this one and this one are by far the prettiest, as you can see. Now look, I'm touching this with my fingers. Can listen carefully and see if you can hear the way the crust, I don't know, just see if you can hear. You can see how soft it is on the inside and what a nice crust we have on the outside. Looking at all the blisters on the surface of this loaf and the very shiny split in the dough. Those are 4 lovely loaves of bread. And it just goes to show you, they do not need to be perfect. These are slightly different sizes, bigger, smaller, therefore a bit darker, but well within the parameters, larger, smaller. This one didn't crack as well, so it probably could have risen a bit more, but it's still a more than adequate, beautiful loaf of bread. Absolutely no question. So there you go. That's how to make Pam's sourdough, styled after 2 different methods and done in a way that suits me. So I will explain a little bit more at the top of this video, or you will have heard me explain at the top of this video a little bit more, and there we go. Signing off.